Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. With me now is Professor David Aworao, Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos, as well as Achike Chude, a Public Affairs Analyst, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. They'll be joining me in the studio in a short while. Now, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu last week presented the proposed 2024 appropriation bill of 27.5 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly. The president said the goal is for the Appropriation Act to come into effect on the 1st of January in 2024, adding that the budget would help ensure macroeconomic stability, reduce the deficit, increase capital spending and allocation to reflect the 8 priority areas of his administration. The Central Bank of Nigeria last Friday said it has become mandatory for all Tier 1 bank accounts and wallets for individuals to have either the Bank Verification Number, the BVN, or the National Identity Number, the NIN. The bank warned that from March 1, 2024, all funded accounts or wallets without BVN or NINs shall be placed on post-no debit or credit and no further transactions permitted. It said that BVN or NIN attached to or associated with all accounts or wallets must be electronically revalidated by January 31, 2024. It noted that henceforth, all existing customer accounts or wallets for individuals with validated BVNs shall be immediately profiled in the NIBSS NIBS Industry Customer Account Database and within 24 hours of opening the accounts or wallets. In the meantime, the central bank last week affirmed the Supreme Court's ruling that the old Naira notes would remain legal tender till further notice. It also directed banks to comply with this ruling to issue and accept old notes alongside the redesigned ones indefinitely. Mukhtar Mohammed is CEO of Finance with Mukhtar. He's a financial policy analyst. He joins me now to take a close look at these stories. Good to have you on the show, Mukhtar.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we want to start first with the budget, the budget that was presented, the budget of renewed hope, and the 27.5 trillion naira figure. That's the size of the budget, around 30% of which will be spent on debt servicing. You know the other figures, I won't tell you. And of course, quite an ambitious revenue generation plan. So what do you make of it? What were the key highlights for you?
The key highlight, first of all, the budget is very ambitious. I want to see how that will plan out as 2024 or when the legislators, of course, I know the legislators, there's nothing that will be done. It's either they hike the crude oil price. That's the only thing they seem to put in more project. I don't see any thorough work going in there. Already it's past second reading in the lower house. So definitely I'm not too optimistic about that. Now, what are my key take on the budget? I think I like that budget deficit has come down from 11 trillion to 9 trillion. I liked it. I like exchange rate at 750 instead of 700 for a start. I like that too. I like crude oil production at 1.78 million barrel from a low of almost 900,000. Fantastic. I like also the policy documents as presented by Mr. President as cost of doing business, cost reducing, overhead costs, tax policies. Fantastic. But my challenge is really in the revenue. Okay. How are we going to generate so much revenue when we're spending about 45% servicing debt? For me, it's not so much of a problem because when you're coming from a height of almost 85% servicing debt, now you're doing 45%. It looks good. But the revenue side, about 18 trillion.
18 trillion revenue.
Revenue.
Yeah, that's a lofty ambition. But clearly, the government has viewed and seen the possibilities out of this. And one of the things that you said you liked, which I picked up on, was the oil production. Yeah. 1.7. But you know, you would have been following the deliberations at OPEC recently, where OPEC has now asked Nigeria to cut. You know, it's given Nigeria a target of, I think, 1.5. And we know that in the short term, ensuring stable and even increased oil production will really help our revenue goals. How do you think we're really going to achieve that oil production level?
I think, for me, we might achieve it. We might not get to 1.778. as I sit here looking at everything, I don't think we'll get there. But 1.5, it could be achievable. Now, the benchmark is $79.77 per barrel. Today, it's selling over above $80 per barrel. I think they are being a little bit conservative, even if I've liked the 73 before,
yes.
so that we can have a buffer that can build up our foreign reserve, especially when external shocks come in. I think it's achievable, but there will be a major challenge if we are not able to achieve that. And the president, I've said, is putting so much emphasis on security.
Right.
And when he puts so much, it's the first time security. This is not the first time security have gotten so much, but this time I think the apparatus, the way he's going about the security, is not just in bringing up the hardwares, the armor tank, the warplanes, but it's looking at the welfare and also looking at the structure of the security network in Nigeria. How can we improve upon it? For me, it's more or less like you are doing both the software and now you're doing both the hardware. So we could begin to see results, and one of those results would be that the production in oil will go up. We've seen that already, 900,000 before. They're doing 1.3 now. So it's fantastic. I think we could meet it. But my challenge will be the revenue side. In case there's any external shock, we are looking at non-oil sector. Now, the only one that I'm so certain about the non-oil sector figure is the terms of the assets that the president has said will be sold.
Okay.
He has not, we don't know which of those assets will be sold, but I'm sure they must have done their groundwork very well to say, okay, some assets will be sold. That will improve our non-oil revenue. And also, you look at the Dangote refinery coming to stream, or Port Harcourt refinery coming to stream, that will not drive a lot of pressure off the FX market, of government revenue, government will earn more revenue by selling this crude, and then that could also serve as a buffer in making sure that our reserve is healthy.
Yeah.
So a lot of policy statement, like I always say, I've said in your program, it's not that we don't have policy statement. Implementation has been key. And this budget is very ambitious.
Yes, of course, it's a proposal that's being submitted to the National Assembly. And we've already seen, politically, a lot of pushback. The opposition parties are already talking about the fact that this doesn't really, help the common man. And there's questions around the spending on social infrastructure, health, education. If there were to be some pushback, what aspects might be further revised, do you think would be particularly in the eye of the storm with regards to maybe changes in the new year?
I don't think they will change anything.
Okay.
Personally, I'm sitting here, I don't think they will change anything. Rather, they might even increase. If you want to look at the attitude of the National Assembly since 1999 to date, it will take a miracle to see any change. Benchmark is stuck at $79.77. I can assure you, it might go up, and we might begin to see local government projects, state government projects included in federal government. It's not today. We've seen that. They go, the Speaker of the State or the House member, the Chairman of the House, he wants to bring development to his community. He's not looking whether it's state. So I will really need to see if there will be any change in that. It has never happened where the president presents a budget to the National Assembly, that same figure is presented back. Rather, you see the National Assembly will say, no, we hike it. The president will say, okay, let me just sign it into law. No. Then we do a supplementary budget. That has always been the key. I'm waiting, indeed, if it's a budget of renewed hope, let's see that hope start with the National Assembly. Okay,
fantastic. I mean, we'll see how that all evolves. We want to talk a bit now about the CBN directive on the BVNs and the NIN. And what is really interesting? When this thing started back in 2014, the idea was that the coverage for BVN would be much further along. But now we're hearing that 45 million accounts have not been validated by BVNs and NINs. Now, the question is, how did we get to opening 45 million accounts that have not been validated?
I think some of those accounts are these wallet accounts.
Okay.
I think so, because they were, you remember the financial inclusion, trying to get the rural area, people in the rural area to be financially inclusive. I think that's where the challenge comes in. And again, I'm shocked to realize that in a bank, if any account in a bank is operating without a BVN, I don't think so. Maybe some of those accounts are dormant. Sometimes there are Nigerians that came in, Nigerians from diaspora, At the time they opened these accounts, there was no BVN. They hadn't come back since then. Some of them, sometimes doing BVM, when you're outside the shore of this country, it's so hectic. I give an example. To do a BVM, NIN or BVN, NIN even, you have to move from Houston, Texas, and you go to Maryland. In the UK, it's almost the same thing. You have to move from whatever city you are to London. So those could be one of these challenges. And it's not free outside the shore of this country. So those could be one of those challenges. But I think majorly, it has to do with the wallet. And then again, because we don't have database when it comes to debt, certificate, who is dead, some of these accounts are there, the people are dormant. So they were all classified. Because to do any business in Nigeria now, even if you're investing in Nigeria, whether you're a capital market or any investment you want to do, or you are doing any transaction with government, you must have an NIN or a BVN, otherwise you cannot transit business.
Yes, and in fact, the House of Representatives ad hoc committee was saying they found that there's about 1.2 trillion naira in these 45 million accounts. So there's a lot of money sitting there, which is either unclaimed.
They should be happy that they are seeing it during President Tinubu's era. Maybe he will come. If it was, you remember when Buhari said he's going to borrow every month, even outstanding dividend, he's going to borrow it. So let's see what the government will do. 1.something trillion is huge, and it's huge. And if you are saying you are shutting down those accounts, I mean, it's
and in fact, there was a time they introduced BVN Lite to reduce the hurdles you needed to be able to operate your accounts.
I think, relatively, with all fairness to the banks, I think it's easy to have your BVM now compared to before.
Yes.
You go in there, you get it within 24 hours. I mean, it's easy now. But again, I think they need to concentrate on the fintech and the wallets. I think that's where the challenge is. Because you could just open with code, the SMA code to open an account, do a transaction. Just all you need is your ATM card or a code that the wallet will give to you. So I think that's where most of these monies, most accounts without BVM.
And it's interesting because the CBN governor recently said that they were going to look at regulation again in the fintech and payment services space. But
that would be huge, because even now, as what I was saying, it's very difficult to do business. Even I think Ikeja Electric, you cannot even recharge without your meter connected to your BVM. So it's getting...
Indeed, and it's a very important issue to consider, because obviously the issues of financial fraud and fraud within the banking system is something that's of concern. Still on CBN, CBN has affirmed the Supreme Court ruling on the redesign on the Naira notes. Finally, we have put an end to this chapter.
It was always
really, that's really what
it's only any Nigerian that want to deceive. So immediately President Tinubu came to power, you should know that it's going to be the end. That policy was dead and buried, because he never supported it. He never liked it. He thought it was rushly done. It felt. So I'm not surprised what is happening to that policy. When you look at the amount of money that was to be printed, the cost of printing those money, and also there was no good structure, and the suffering a lot of Nigerians went through because of that policy, I think.
And if we look at the journey back from when this policy emerged, one of the things I say that it's almost like a microcosm of Nigeria sometimes.
Exactly.
If you look at the journey of this redesigned Naira notes, the sort of policy U-turns, the politicization of it, the impact ultimately on the common man. This is where it always pinches, and then the effect on the wider economy. And now we're back to point one.
Wherever we are today in the microeconomy space was as a result of that policy, especially with regard to the manufacturing sector and the real sector of the economy. The key driver of Nigerian economy is in the informal sector.
Right.
The informal sector, that is the people, the mechanics, the trader in the market, they were the ones that were largely affected during this redesign policy, and they have not recovered up to this. A lot of businesses have shut down that have not been able to come back again because of this policy. So with the challenges we are seeing with our economy, especially in the area of inflation, started from the redesign note.
And the original rationale for the redesigned policy, let's even talk about the rationale, because part of the rationale was to mop up. One of the rationales was to mop up excess liquidity. Now, if we look at the rationale and then the action that was taken to try and achieve that goal, you know, they're two separate things. You could argue that the rationale itself, the principle behind wanting to do that was sound. Well, but the action taken to tackle that perhaps had issues. So let's talk about the principle behind trying to do that. If you look at where we are now, is that still a challenge that Nigeria faces? It's
still a challenge in terms of mopping up a lot of funds that are not in the banking space. They fuel a lot of inflation. But again, not only inflation in the local currency, they've also fueled volatility in the FX market because of a lot of FX are not in the banking space, just like a lot of those.
That's why we have a black market.
That's why we have a black market. They are not, we've not been able to regulate that sector. I think that's also boiled down to CBN. You can't be printing currencies and you don't know the how. Remember Emefiele time telling us that about 3.2 trillion were out of the banking space. That was huge. And at the point they said they were able to, during the redesign policy, they came out that they were able to recover about 1.9 trillion, but they still have some outstanding. And you know what happened? Then the somersault, the Supreme Court judgment, the political side of it, the timing of it. I think we need to look at how to manage Nigerian microeconomy. Because Nigeria, number one, is a consumer-driven economy, and it's an informal-driven economy where a lot of transactions are done by cash.
Right, yes.
You could also look at that. That redesign policy brought a little bit of positivity because now sometimes the granola seller now have a POS where you can use. Before now, it wasn't existent. So we must also look at that positivity of that. If you go to the market now, there's a POS, or sometimes those merchants that have their own POS where you can use and do transaction. The only reason why they weren't accepting it was because of the cost, the cost in it. And so that has its positive. But I think to mop up excess liquidity in the system has not worked to bring down inflation in Nigeria, because that for me is not the major cause of inflation in Nigeria. It's just part of it. The major cause of inflation in Nigeria as it stands today is macroeconomic pressure, production pressure, supply side, and then the muster of it all today as we stand is the exchange rate. Because 80% of up to 90% of what we consume will bring it out of the shore of this country. And some of these people are not able to access FX in the formal market. And they used to access that FX through the bureau de change. When that sector was taken away by the government, seems to be they were not provided with an alternative, and that's the challenge.
Very interesting, thank you. And actually, really good point there about the unintended consequences that more people are now using electronic means of payment. Thank you so much for being with us on this day live. Mukhtar Mohammed, financial policy analyst and CEO of Finance with Mukhtar. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.